Young job seekers are facing tough times amid increasing global complexities and uncertainty. And CNA's Jeremy Ko investigates the challenges plaguing the job market in East Asia.
Young job seekers could still be in for a tough time in East Asia. Challenging headwinds remain in the labor market even as the COVID-19 crisis recedes. This includes a global economic slowdown, various geopolitical tensions, and tighter monetary conditions. Research shows young people in the workforce are nearly 3.5 times as likely as adults to be unemployed. Now, last year, the global youth unemployment rate stood at 13.3%, while that for adults is 3.9%. Youths were hit disproportionately harder during the pandemic, with those aged between 15 and 24 years experiencing a higher percentage loss in employment. That's when lockdown measures were imposed by many governments and employers suffered steep declines in revenue. Firms sought to retain staff, but they also held back on new recruitment. And younger workers were less likely to have the seniority and types of contracts needed to keep their jobs. Since then, headline indicators such as unemployment rates and employment to population ratios have been approaching pre-pandemic levels for many regions. But that's not the case for East Asia, where the labor market is playing catch-up, with 2023 numbers still below 2019 levels. Meanwhile, the jobless rate stayed elevated at 4.7% in 2023, higher than the 4.3% seen in 2019. A key driver is China's rising youth joblessness, which surged to an all-time high of 21.3% last June. Subsequently, authorities did not release any new data for 6 months until December, when it came up with a new metric to exclude students. Some observers say the issue is one of Beijing's biggest headaches, threatening social stability if it's not well handled. And putting a further strain on the employment situation, the number of university graduates joining the workforce is also expected to rise to nearly 12 million this year, following a record high in 2023. But China's youth unemployment story in a way reflects some of the broader trends in the region, such as a mismatch of skills or expectations and structural problems. Now, in South Korea, more than 1.26 million young people were unemployed after graduation, with more than half of them possessing a bachelor's degree or higher. A UN agency says young people who lose their job or fail to obtain one are vulnerable to scarring. Now, this is a phenomenon where they'll fare worse than their peers in the labor market, even if economic conditions improve again. Now, that's because while waiting, they may accept a job for which they are overqualified, potentially trapping them in a cycle that involves low pay and informal work. Some may give up on job searching altogether, isolating themselves from society. Now, to address the problem, South Korea has offered such youths a monthly allowance of $490 in hopes of encouraging them to leave their homes and reintegrate into society. Now, in China, some young Chinese have embraced the term 躺平, or to lie flat, reflecting disillusionment and doing whatever it takes to simply get by. More youths have also decided to become full-time children, getting paid by the parents to handle household tasks.
Well, in South Korea, young people are also grappling with job insecurity as large companies cut back on hiring and apply stricter screening criteria. On average, it takes more than 10 months to land a job after graduation, according to official data. And about 248,000 Koreans in their 20s are unemployed as of March. Subin Lim has more.
Han Sung-ju spends most of her free time reading or on her computer looking for jobs. It's been her daily routine since she graduated with a master's degree from a prestigious university in Seoul in August 2022. The 28-year-old English literature major has applied for more than 100 positions, but no luck.
해외 영업 쪽으로 지원을 많이 하고 있는데 비슷하게 제가 또 지원할 수 있는 부분으로는 전략 기획이라든지 뭐 구매, 영업 관리 이런 쪽으로도 계속 다 폭넓게 지원하고 있습니다. 계속 제가 좀 어려움을 겪는 부분은 AI 테스트라는 부분, 인적성 검사 그쪽에서 좀 탈락을 많이 했어서.
Besides these tests, which aim to gauge whether an applicant fits the company's culture, many Korean firms also require job seekers to ace English proficiency exams. Ms. Han isn't giving up. She has taken on a third internship since graduating and hopes to eventually land a job that pays more than $30,000 a year. But she knows prospects are slim.
취업 시장이 어렵다는 말들이 사실 매년 있어 왔던 것 같긴 해요. 그런데 최근 2년, 1년 사이에 좀 더 그렇게 고용 한파 얘기들 많이 나오면서 경력직 시장도 좀 많이 얼어붙었다고 하더라고요. 그래서 그런 걸 보면은 확실히 좀 더 취업이 어렵나 싶기도 하고.
Nearly 4 out of 10 young unemployed Koreans have been jobless for the past 3 years, according to government figures released last year. Training centers have sprouted up to help job seekers. Students at W Speech Training Center learn to speak up at interviews and improve their articulation and communication skills. Courses aren't cheap, at nearly $500 for its most popular 8-week course, but it's seeing growing enrollment.
대학을 다니시는 분들도 계시고요. 졸업을 하신 분들도 계시고 또 여러 번 떨어지셔서 이제 N수생이신 분들도 계세요. 수요는 좀 높은 편이에요. 왜냐하면 이제 면접이 유형도 굉장히 많이 다양화되기도 했고.
The center says, on average, about 85% of its students secure jobs. 29-year-old Kim Do-yeon hopes to be one of them. She previously worked in luxury retail and is now going for interviews with major airlines. She says the job market has become more competitive since COVID-19.
코로나 때는 사실 채용이 불투명했잖아요. 그러니까 모든 어학 성적이나 이런 게 다 고고익선이란 말이 있을 정도로 높으면 높을수록 좋다라는 얘기가 있더라고요. 그래서 예전보다 다 좀 상향 평준화된 느낌이라 모든 걸 다 높은 점수로 받아야 되는 게 좀 힘든 것 같아요.
Miss Kim and Miss Han share the same dream as many youths in South Korea. Young adults here aim to join large companies and shun smaller firms which pay much less. This is causing an imbalance in the job market, with SMEs chronically short of workers, as young job seekers forego such employment opportunities.
For more on youth unemployment across the region, let's speak with seasoned China watcher Francesco Sishi, Senior Researcher at Renmin University of China, and Dr. Lim Tai-wei, Adjunct Senior Researcher Fellow at the National University of Singapore at East Asia Institute. Well, thanks for joining us. Gentlemen, well, first to you, Dr. Lim, just picking up from that story that we just heard, it seemed like South Korean youths, they're fixated on landing jobs at big companies. So even if it means smaller firms struggle to find workers. So help us understand, Dr. Lim, what is driving this mindset? Is it a cultural thing, economic thing, or is it something else entirely?
Well, it's an adaptation to a new normal because it's not just the jobs that you have mentioned earlier on about SME jobs or things that are sort of non-traditional MNCs, but the gig economy, part-time jobs are also increasing in number. This is because of sometimes structural changes in the economy, sometimes the preference of young people to be able to take up part-time jobs so that they can release time for other things, including entrepreneurial ventures or to have a better work-life balance. So actually, these are sort of more options for young people to choose from with regards to the mode of work that they are interested in. So many experts in South Korea have also mentioned that perhaps the most important thing is to think of security and safety nets for such young people who prefer to focus on non-traditional modes of work, like part-time jobs, for example, to be able to provide them with medical as well as security, social security, and other benefits that can help them sort of be more secure in terms of their old age or in terms of their needs, like medical needs. So this kind of changing modes of employment is probably going to be increasing in number, following the examples that you see in even more sort of advanced
So, Dr. Lim, I hear what
economies
you're
that
saying
have
about
developed
the
earlier on.
changing mode of these various jobs. And that's where I want to bring you in now, Mr. Sishi. We saw some really alarming stats there. China's high youth unemployment rate, for instance, 1 in 5 grads not able to find a job. I imagine you've been studying so hard all these years, and to not land a job must be really demoralizing. Is that then an indication that the government's economic policies, for instance, maybe haven't been quite so successful in terms of helping these young people out?
Well, it is a very, very complex issue because they have expanded enormously in the past 20 years, the number of people who have access to university. But actually, the outcome, so to put, of these university graduates is not even. There are good university, not so good university, bad university. At the beginning, all these university graduates could land a job in big cities and big firms because there was such a lack of, there was demand for graduated. However, now the situation is pretty stabilized. So these young people, in theory, should go back to the countryside, to provincial cities. But in lifestyle in provincial cities is very different than in big cities like Beijing or Shanghai. Even
so, Mr.
cities
Sishi,
which are
I just want to pick
sizable.
up an interesting
Yes.
point you said there about how the youth should then move to the countryside. But how can we sort of reconcile the paradox, though? I mean, you've got high youth unemployment rates in China, South Korea, Japan. But let's talk about their economic growth and all that technological advancements. You know, so what are some of the underlying issues, though, that need to be addressed here?
Well, I think that it's very different. I mean, situation in Korea, in Japan, and in China. In China, you have still good opportunities for very good students from very good universities. What you have is, in reality, is that you don't have many jobs for not so good students in big cities, but you still have job opportunities in smaller cities. But people don't want to move to smaller cities for various reasons. However, the situation in Japan and Korea, for the little I understand, is very different because there you have I would say, an overall saturation. The market, of course, is much smaller. The population is much smaller. People have graduated from university for much longer time. So in China, you have an issue of spreading people to places where actually there is need for, intellectual contribution. In Japan and Korea, my understanding is that the situation is saturated overall. So I would say it's hard to compare.
So in the meantime as well, I mean, sadly, scammers, they're finding every opportunity to take advantage of these desperate job seekers where the promise of employment could easily end up leaving them worse off. Well, we spoke to Jaya Das, Managing Director, Randstad Asia Pacific. Let's have a listen.
So you see fake jobs being posted, asking applicants to pay to be considered for these roles. And promising extremely good returns, job security, health benefits, and so on, which are typical factors that Chinese employees look for, and saying that if you pay such and such, you would be basically escalated up the food chain in terms of being considered or being prioritized for an interview with these companies.
So, Dr. Lim, I mean, it seems like, so many young people, they're willing to pay for a chance at a job in China. They end up getting scammed. Aside from that, there's also this growing, lying flat mentality among youths starting to live with their parents. Are you worried that this possibly could represent a lost generation? Are they disillusioned with the country's political and economic systems?
Well, it could also mean that it's a form of adaptation to a new normal. In which some individuals, perhaps out of their own volition and interest, prefers a different kind of work format rather than working slavishly for a long time. We have seen this in the previous examples before, whereby when Japan entered into post-bubble era, the generations that came later after the post-bubble era have also shown changes in the way they work and the format and the lifestyles in which they work very different from a previous generation. So all these could be evolving adaptation. They may not be permanent. They may morph into other forms that will adapt to the economy. Well, we have already seen a very creative example. For example, when the youth employment was high, some of them were actually rehired by their parents to become a full-time household worker or household personnel for the family. So we are likely to see more of these kinds of adaptation, including releasing entrepreneurial energies to try out business ideas as well.
All right. Mr. Sishi, now South Korea, they have offered youths a monthly allowance of $490, for instance, in hopes of encouraging them to reintegrate into society. I mean, firstly, is that enough? And I'm wondering what are some of the other initiatives that have shown promise in addressing youth unemployment in these countries?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not so well aware about South Korea, and it depends. 490 could be enough. It could be not enough, depending on what is the situation of these youngsters. The problem is that when you live with your family and your family is not obsessed, let's put it in this way, to kick you out of the house, you have a very nice cushion, a very nice situation. It's harder in a way to move out of this comfort zone and try out something more risky, which is actually what happened in the past. So you are stuck in between. You have already a quite comfortable life, yet not many incentives to go out and try out something. But this situation, I think, of course, is not ideal, but is not that bad socially, because these people, although they are not very happy with their situation, they are not unhappy either. They won't go down on the streets protesting and, smashing things. So you are in a situation socially that is really not that bad. So one shouldn't be too obsessed, I think, about things. And certainly the reality of the situation is that you have to provide, there must be opportunities for these youngsters to find out their own path, their own way to their own lives. And this is, of course, not very easy because everything is changing now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sishi, Francesco Sishi, Senior Researcher at Renmin University of China, as well as Dr. Lim Tai Wei, Adjunct Senior Research Fellow at the National University of Singapore East Asia Institute. Thanks very much for your time and thoughts.